The waiting room was filled with silence so sharp that even the ticking clock on the wall seemed to echo. Suits and polished shoes lined the chairs, each person clutching a leather portfolio, rehearsing their answers in their heads. But then, the glass doors opened, and all eyes turned. He wasn't like the others. His suit was wrinkled, his shoes scuffed from long miles walked, and his tie, though knotted carefully, hung slightly off-center. In one hand he carried a worn folder. In the other he clutched the tiny hand of a little girl, no older than 5. Her hair was neatly tied into 2 braids, her small backpack swinging with each step. She looked around with curious eyes, unaware of the stares fixed upon her. The man was Daniel. Once, not so long ago, he had been just another name in the corporate world, working endless hours to provide for his wife and daughter. But life had a way of unraveling without warning. His wife's sudden passing left him holding more than grief. He was left with a little girl who looked at him with eyes that expected the world, even as his own had crumbled. He had promised her that day, standing by her mother's grave with shaking hands, that he would never let her feel alone, never let her suffer because of his struggles. So when the babysitter canceled last minute and the neighbor couldn't help, he had no choice but to bring her with him to the most important interview of his life. The receptionist raised her eyebrows as they approached, her glance flickering between Daniel and the child. "Sir, this is a corporate interview," she said softly, her tone a mixture of concern and disbelief. "I know," Daniel replied, forcing a smile. I couldn't leave her." The receptionist hesitated, then nodded and gestured for him to sit. He lowered himself into a chair, pulling his daughter close to his side. The other candidates shifted uncomfortably. A few whispered to each other. One man chuckled under his breath. Daniel heard it all but said nothing. He rubbed his daughter's small hand gently, grounding himself in her presence. When they finally called his name, he stood, heart pounding. His daughter clutched his hand tighter. "Daddy, can I come too?" she whispered. "You have to, sweetheart," he murmured. "Just stay close to me." As the heavy office doors opened, the panel of interviewers looked up, their eyes narrowing with confusion at the sight of the child. Whispers floated across the polished table. But then, at the far end, the CEO himself rose from his chair. He was a tall man with silver streaks in his hair, his suit sharp but his gaze softer than expected. His name was Richard Coleman, a man known for building an empire but rarely showing vulnerability. He studied Daniel for a long moment, his eyes shifting to the little girl clutching her father's hand. The room was tense, as though everyone expected Daniel to be dismissed immediately. But instead, Richard walked around the table, approached the child, and did something no one expected. He knelt down to her level. "What's your name, young lady?" Richard asked, his voice gentle. "Lily," she whispered, half hiding behind her father's leg. "That's a beautiful name," Richard said, smiling warmly. "And this must be your dad. Is he here to get a job today?" She nodded quickly, her braids bouncing. "He needs a job so he can buy me ice cream." The room burst into light laughter, the tension easing. Daniel's face burned, but Richard only smiled wider. He stood, patted Daniel's shoulder, and said in a voice everyone heard, "A man who brings his child with him doesn't do it out of carelessness. He does it because he has no other choice, and because he knows what matters most. Let's hear him out." Daniel's chest tightened, his throat thick with gratitude. He sat down across from the panel, Lily sitting quietly on a chair beside him, coloring in her notebook. The questions began, technical ones, sharp and calculated, designed to test his skills. Daniel answered each with calm precision, drawing from years of experience. But every now and then his eyes flickered to Lily, who was scribbling little flowers and stars on her paper, humming softly to herself. Each glance reminded him of why he was there, of the promise he had made. Halfway through, one of the interviewers frowned. "Mr. Daniels, this role demands late nights and high responsibility. How do you expect to balance that with your personal situation?" Daniel inhaled deeply. The unspoken words hung heavy in the air, A single father can't handle this. I won't pretend it's easy, Daniel admitted. There are nights when I stay awake worrying about whether I'm enough for her, but being her father has also taught me patience, discipline, and resilience. I don't waste time anymore. I've learned to prioritize what matters, to focus harder when I'm at work so I can be present when I'm at home. I can't promise to be perfect, but I can promise I'll give everything I have, both for this company and for her. Silence fell across the room. For the first time, the interview wasn't about numbers or achievements. It was about something raw and undeniable, human strength. Richard leaned back, his eyes distant as though recalling something buried deep. Then, without a word, he stood and left the room. The other panelists looked unsettled but continued with the formalities. When the interview ended, Daniel gathered his papers, thanked them politely, and took Lily's hand once more. He walked out of the building with his heart heavy. He had done his best, but the doubt in the panelists' eyes still lingered in his mind. The next morning his phone rang. It was the company, his breath caught. "Mr. Daniels," a voice said, "the CEO would like to meet you in his office." When Daniel arrived, Lily once again at his side, he was led into a large office with floor-to-ceiling windows. Richard was there, waiting with 2 cups of coffee on the desk. But what caught Daniel off guard was the sight of 2 framed photos on the shelf behind him, one of Richard standing proudly with a young boy, and another, older photo of a woman smiling brightly. Richard gestured for them to sit. Then he looked at Daniel with eyes that carried both weight and warmth. "I lost my wife when my son was 5, Richard said quietly. "I remember walking into meetings with him because I couldn't find anyone to watch him. I remember the looks people gave me, the whispers. They thought I was weak, distracted, unreliable. But he grew up and he's the proudest achievement of my life." His voice wavered slightly, and then he smiled. "So when I saw you yesterday, I saw myself. And I knew I couldn't let this company miss out on someone like you." Daniel swallowed hard, emotion rising in his chest. Richard slid an envelope across the table. "This isn't just a job offer, it's an opportunity. I want you to lead a project we've been struggling with. You'll have flexibility, because I know what it means to be both a father and a professional. And because I believe men like you don't just make good employees, they make great leaders." Tears stung Daniel's eyes as he accepted the envelope. Lily, too young to fully understand, only clapped her hands and cheered. Daddy got the job. Richard chuckled, reaching into his drawer. He pulled out 2 gift cards and handed one to Lily. "And since you mentioned ice cream yesterday," he said with a wink, "this one's for you. But I also have another, because sometimes dads need ice cream too." Daniel laughed, the sound breaking through the heaviness of years of struggle. In that moment, it wasn't just about a job. It was about dignity, about the recognition that being a parent didn't make him less, but more. The 3 of them shared a quiet moment in that office. 2 fathers who had walked the same road, and a little girl who unknowingly reminded them both what mattered most. From that day on, Daniel worked tirelessly, not just for his daughter but also for the company that had given him a chance when he needed it most. And every time he passed Richard's office, he remembered that kindness could be the difference between breaking someone and helping them rise. And Lily, well, she never stopped telling the story of the day her daddy took her to a job interview, and how everyone stared until the CEO pulled out 2 ice cream cards that changed their lives forever.